Good morning, church family. My name is Vanessa. I'll be reading from Habakkuk 3, 1 and 2, and 12 through 19. A prayer of Habakkuk, the prophet, according to Shigionoth. O Lord, I have heard the report of you, and your work, O Lord, do I fear. In the midst of the years, revive it. In the midst of the years, make it known. In wrath, remember mercy. Verse 12. You marched through the earth in fury. You threshed the nations in anger. You went out for the salvation of your people, for the salvation of your anointed. You crushed the head of the house of the wicked, laying him bare from thigh to neck. Selah. You pierced with his own arrows the heads of his warriors. You came like a whirlwind to scatter me, rejoicing as if to devour the poor in secret. You trampled the sea with your horses, the surging of mighty waters. I hear and my body trembles. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters into my bones. My legs tremble beneath me. Yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon people who invade us. Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God the Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on high places. To the choir master with stringed instruments. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. As we continue this series, I hope you have found the book of Habakkuk, either in your iPhone, iPad, your Bible, wherever you can. I want you to see this marvelous, marvelous chapter and how it fits with chapter 1 and 2 as we conclude this series called More Than Meets the Eye. And what happens in chapter 3 is after 2 chapters of wrestling with God, waiting upon God, Habakkuk receives God's answers by faith. And through faith, his wrestling and his waiting on God turned into worship. I enjoyed the worship this morning, didn't you? And it was just wonderful to sing together, but we're not done worshiping. We're going to see the revelation of God. We're going to see him in his word. We're going to see the great things that he has done for us. We're going to come to the table together, and we're going to remember and remind ourselves once again of the incredible work of our God on the cross through his son Jesus, and we're going to continue to worship, right? We're going to continue to celebrate the incredible things that God has done for us. And what we're going to see in Habakkuk is a response of praise in the midst of some terrible times and some difficult times. And so as some of you are here and you're going into a time of Thanksgiving, and honestly, you're not really very thankful. You're not having a great time, and your prayers have not been answered perhaps the way that you wanted. And maybe God, instead of really giving you what you wanted, kind of doubled down on what you didn't want, and you're just struggling. We all do that from time to time. And maybe kind of what caused me to want to go into Habakkuk is when we look around the world and we see what's happening in Israel and in Ukraine and in all the different countries of the world, not just the violence, but also in our own country, the cultural decay and all the things that we're so concerned about as believers. How do we deal with this and still have joy? Well, the Bible has so many instances of that, and so I'm grateful to be back this Sunday morning. I hope you enjoyed Dr. Cloer last week. He's just such a wonderful guy, and got to talk with him this week at the state convention. Saw him down there, and so I went down and was a part of our Baptist State Convention, and it was a wonderful time. Our state convention's doing very well, and you're a part of that. Through your giving, you are helping plant churches all over the state of Florida. So know that your giving matters in your state. And we are an incredibly fast-growing state. People are coming here from all over the world and all over the United States, and we have incredible opportunity. And so I'm really excited to be, through our generosity and through our giving, we're supporting church planting here in Florida. And so thank you for allowing me to go to that. And then I was at the state convention in Virginia last Sunday as well, where they had a tribute to my father, who had been a leader of that convention for many, many years. And so it was a wonderful time to remember him. And even those times are bittersweet when you're thankful and grateful, but you're missing someone, and you've lost that person in your everyday life. And so we face these kind of struggles. There are big struggles, and there are little struggles, and there are medium struggles. Just for example, I got a call from my daughter a couple of days ago, and she started the conversation with these words: "Dad, are you sitting down?" And here's why she started with those words, because a few weeks ago she drove home from college, and she's down in West Palm at Palm Beach Atlantic Christian College. She drove back, and she didn't see that the front grill of her car was missing. Somebody had backed into it somewhere in the parking deck and had dented and pulled off with part of it, and she just kind of didn't notice, or she did notice. She says, "Well, I guess it dropped off." But anyway, someone hit her in the parking deck. Well, we swapped cars, and I had to file that and turn it in and get all of that fixed up. So I've been driving her car, she's been driving mine. And what was the last thing I said to her when she took my car to West Palm? "Whatever you do, don't wreck this car. Don't get a scratch on this car." And so when I heard her say, "Dad, are you sitting down?" I knew something had happened to the car. And I was just thinking, how could you have wrecked it? How? That's not possible. It's not possible. And let me show you a picture. This is what she sent me. So that's just the back corner of my car. Now here's what's interesting. Turn that picture off. I'm tired of looking at it. I just wanted you to see it. She goes, "Dad, somebody broke your taillight." And then she sends me that picture. That is much more than, she says, "I don't know why kids don't leave notes." They don't leave notes. And so I said, "Well, call the campus police." She called the campus police. They said, "Oh, we know what happened. A giant limb fell off the tree she was parked under." So she had, to avoid being hit by the negligence of others in the parking deck, she moved out into an open parking deck on campus. And you know what they called that? An act of God. We can't blame anybody. And sometimes life is like that. That's exactly what happened with Habakkuk. He's been praying and praying against the negligence of the people of Israel. They were sinning. They were rejecting God. And so God's discipline was coming. And so he was just saying, "Stop sinning. You're calling in the discipline of God." And he prays to God in chapter 1 and 2 and says, "God, aren't you going to do something about this? We need to get right with you. We had revival a couple of decades ago with Josiah, but that revival didn't last." And he's just asking God why. In fact, here's the problem described. He says, "Oh Lord, how long shall I cry for help and you will not hear, or cry to you violence, or you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity, and why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise." He's like, "Stop, turn that picture off. I'm tired of seeing this. What are you going to do about it?" And God says, "Here's what I'm going to do about it. I'm going to raise up Babylon to destroy you. There will be a remnant. But it's going to get worse. It's going to go from bad to worst." It moved from the negligence of others to just the act of God. And so sometimes in life, we suffer from the negligence of others who sin against us or who sin in our community, in our world. And so the discipline or the results of their negligence impacts you. Somebody backs into you in the parking deck. You didn't see it coming. Our nation goes into vast debt, and we couldn't stop it. We couldn't figure out how to do it. Or someone attacks another country, and now we're having to send our troops. Sometimes it's the negligence and sin of others, and sometimes it's your negligence, your sin. You're not looking, and you just ram your car into the person in front of you. Or you're living in such a life that you cause your own wreck in your life. So sometimes we suffer from the negligence of others, sometimes we suffer from our own negligence, and sometimes we're suffering because we are under an act of God upon our nation, upon our world. I wonder how long God will hold back discipline on us for the slaughter of the unborn. I wonder how long we can continue pushing God aside in so many ways and rejecting his morals as a nation and not see greater and greater discipline. I wonder how long. I think we're already seeing it in so many ways, but it brings about into our lives times of struggle, difficulty. And we see the plan revealed to Habakkuk in chapter 2. God says, I know it looks bad, but here's where it's going, Habakkuk. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. So no matter what you see happening, whatever kind of discipline you see happening or whatever kind of craziness you see in your world, here's what God promises. It is going somewhere, and here's what it's going. The glory of God will fill the earth. Do you believe that, church? That's the reason we can sing like we just sung. Because we know the plan, we know the promise. But here's the principle. If we're going to have joy, and if we're going to live in the proper way, in no matter what the circumstances are, when everything's going our way or when everything's falling apart, here is the same principle for life. It's the great principle of Habakkuk. It is the great principle of the New Testament. The just shall live by what? Faith. Faith. Faith in the plan of God, faith in the sovereignty of God. We must trust him. And when we come to understand these truths, it leads us to a place from wrestling and waiting to worshiping. And I think this happens over and over and over again. When we see chapter 3, there's a stark difference between it in terms of literature from chapter 1 and 2. You notice in verse 1 it says, this is a prayer of Habakkuk. But then he says, I want you to add this to music. Here's what this is. This is what we call an ode. An ode is a poem that is written for the purpose of singing. And so this is a worship psalm. It is part hymn, which celebrates. It's a psalm about the glory and power of God. And then it ends with a psalm of praise, which is just celebration and giving glory to God. And so this is an ode, and it is an ode to joy. Does that, y'all recognize that title, Ode to Joy? Probably the greatest symphony ever composed. Arguably is the Ninth Symphony by Beethoven. It starts like this. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. How many of you recognize that? Or you may not, hey, a lot of you. That's so, praise God. And then it has several movements, and it goes up and down, and then it gets to my favorite part, which is the end. And he puts together what is called the Ode to Joy, and it's one of the greatest musical moments in the history of planet Earth. We know it as this song, Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. Y'all can sing with me. Hearts unfold like flowers before you, on way to the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin and sadness, drive the dark of doubt away. Giver of immortal gladness, fill us with the light of day. Y'all recognize that tune? It's so exciting. And Beethoven, it's probably his greatest moment in his greatest symphony, and Beethoven was deaf. They had to tell him that the people behind him were raving in a standing ovation when he performed it for the first time. How did he do this? Well, he had an ability to hear without his ears. And faith is the ability to see without your eyes. And faith can lead you from worry to worship. And I truly believe if you live by faith, even in difficult times, you may wrestle, you may worry, you may have some of those times of really waiting and watching, but I truly believe faith will lead a child of God into praise. I think we can find a song in every storm, but only through faith. And this glorious ode to joy by Habakkuk is marvelous. What it reveals is what Paul had happened in his life is he learned to have praise in difficult times. It doesn't just come naturally to us, and I don't think it often just comes quickly. Listen to what he said in Philippians, I know how to be brought low and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty, hunger, abundance and need. I've learned the secret. What is it? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. With faith, we can learn to find a song in the storm, to find joy on the journey. What Habakkuk gives us are two things I want us to notice before we go to the table today. A picture of faith-driven joy, and then the process of a faith-elicited, faith-supported, faith-generated praise. So the picture, he gives us a beautiful picture of what it looks like. And it's a surprising picture. And then I think we can see from it the process that we need to do this. And maybe this is just in time for Thanksgiving. Look at the picture he gives us. Drop down to verse 16. Here's what faith-driven joy looks like. I hear, what has he just heard? He's heard this vision, and he's seen this vision partly in reality because he sees the Babylonians attacking the country and building up their forces. So he's seeing that. He's also seeing in I think God giving him prophetic vision, not just of now, but also I think of what's going to happen, of the future. And so he says, I see all of this. And sometimes this is all we can do when we hear the answer God gives us to our prayer. When we look at the future of our world or of our country or of our family, here's what he does. This is so honest. He says, I hear and my body trembles. My lips quiver. You get the picture? Rottenness enters into my bones. In the Hebrew, that's really, it's as if his bones turned to jelly and his legs didn't want to support him. He says, my legs tremble beneath me. Have you ever had a wreck? I've talked a lot about wrecks today, but anyway, as you get out, it's like his body, he's having a physical, emotional response, and it's not necessarily good. When he looks at the reality of things, God's not answering his prayer exactly the way that he had hoped. But listen to this majestic statement of faith you ought to memorize. And yet, though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield how much food? No food. The flock be cut off from the field, and there be no herd in the stalls. This is all in actuality what happened. The Babylonians would have destroyed all of that. They would have sieged the city. They would have starved them out. And he says, literally, if there is complete economic collapse and doom, there's no figs on the tree, And if you look at the agriculture of that day and the economy of that day, this covers it. There was nothing. No 401k, no Social Security. He says, if everything fails, yet I will rejoice in the what? The Lord. Something's happened to Habakkuk. His focus has gone from the figs and the absence of the flocks. And he says, I can rejoice in Yahweh. And he uses the personal name of Yahweh. All throughout Habakkuk, he uses this very personal word for Yahweh, for the Lord. I will rejoice in the covenant-making God, the one who's made a promise with me. And I will take joy in the God of my, what? My salvation. This is the response of faith. And he says, God, the Lord is my strength. It's not the figs. It's not the bones in my body. It's not the fruit on the vine. It's not the olive yield. It's not the flocks that I own. God is my strength. And look at this beautiful, beautiful picture. He makes my feet that were wobbly. He makes them like the deer that treads on high places so that I can actually tread on my high places. I love this imagery. Here's a picture of some ibex goats up in the Palestinian region. I just love this picture. There are pictures of deer up there, and because what you see in the background is that, and just abject barrenness of the Negev wilderness, and then you see these goats just hanging out on the precipice. And they're not looking too scared. They're hopping around from cliff to cliff, hanging out on rocks that you and we'd crawl to the edge. We wouldn't probably even crawl to the edge. And these goats, are they stupid? What's wrong with them? They know their feet will hold them. And they are trusting in this incredible God-given ability. They don't have the consciousness to understand what they have, but what he says is that this is what God has done for me, is that when everything is falling apart, I have, in my faith in God, been able to live and elevate myself in my thinking, in my mind, to be in a higher place. And in this higher place, I'm able to stand, and my feet will not slip. So what the early readers would have seen this is that high up on these cliffs is a place of great protection, because the troops, Babylon, weren't going to those troops aren't going to climb that cliff. That was a great place of protection, was high up in the mountains. The people that have the heights have the advantage in any battle. But also, at that elevation, you have what? You have the best perspective and the best vision. And you can see the enemy coming, or you can see the help of the Lord coming. And so he says, listen, this is, I think, a beautiful picture of Christian joy in terrible, troubling times. Is we have the ability to live in a higher plane through faith. We have a perspective on the big picture of God that says all things work together for the good of those who are called by God. All things work together for the good of those that love His appearing, those who have placed their faith in Christ. There is always light at the end of the tunnel, and you can live on a higher plane through faith. Now, how do you get there? What's the process? Well, an interesting process, I think, unfolds here. Let me go through it very quickly. Habakkuk 2, if we back up to the end of chapter 2, I think this is really phase 1 of finding joy in difficult times. He says, what profit is the idol when its maker has carved it, or an image, a teacher of falsehood? What profit is there if in these false gods, he says? So he's looking at what some of the Israeli people and the Jewish people in that day were turning to as they were facing these difficult times and the crops failing and the Babylonians coming. They were turning to man-made idols, and he says that is absolute foolishness, for its maker trusts in his own handiwork when he fashions speechless idols. Woe to him who says to a piece of wood, wake up! To a mute stone, arise! And that is your teacher? A stone? A piece of wood that you made? Behold, it is overlaid with gold and silver, but there is no breath at all inside of it, but Yahweh is in his holy temple. Let all the earth stop their complaining. Stop crying out to those false gods. Let them be silent in the presence of the one true and living God. You see, the first step is a rejection of those things that you have fashioned, that you think are going to support you and help you and keep you through all the difficult times that come. And I think you need to make plans, and you need to have water saved up for a hurricane. And you need to have money set aside for retirement. I'm not saying be foolish in all of those things. You just simply can't trust in the things you can make with your hands. To have this kind of higher joy, you can't try to keep getting high on the things of this world. What are you trying to get high on? Alcohol? Or the Baptist alcohol? Iced tea? Fried chicken? Pizza? Netflix? Constant news? Constant social media? What's your fix? What are you using to mask the misery that this world and this life will bring to you? What are you trying to use to try to get high? You're not getting a bit higher. It is temporary, it is addictive, and it is a liar. And it is a substitute for the only thing that can take you to heights of true peace and joy, and that's faith in Jesus. Maybe you need to check out why you can't have a sense of joy, why your circumstances just jerk you all over the place and you're up and down like a roller coaster with your circumstances. Maybe because you have supported your joy and your sense of well-being on all sorts of false highs. Temporary. And it's so dangerous. And the saddest part about it is that by investing in all the temporary highs that you are accumulating in life, you ultimately miss the true joy of the one true and only high place. And that's peace with Jesus. So the first part of the process is rejecting your false idols and running to the sovereign true God. And you see him recognize Yahweh hears our prayers. He's in his temple. He's on his throne. And he is alive. And so we trust in the work, in the sovereignty of God. So after recognizing that, then he goes into this they call a theophany. It is a painting of God as he sees him, sort of in personal terms. And so he begins a description of God on the warpath. God coming in rescue, in judgment, and then we walk through all these verses that we heard Vanessa read. Let me just kind of move through them quickly. It says, God came from Teman, and the Holy One from Mount Paran, Selah. That's just a musical term there. His splendor covered the heavens, and the earth was full of praise, and his brightness was like the light. Rays flashed from his hand, and there he veiled his power. Before him went pestilence, and plague followed at his heels. Now, right there, you hear some things that jump out. If you know the Old Testament well, you begin to get a feeling when you start thinking about plagues and pestilences and God cloaked in lightning and clouds and all of this thing. And then you notice the geography from Teman and from Mount Paran. This is the route of the Exodus. And so what I really think that he's beginning to do, he says, I have heard the report of you, he says in verse 2. I know what you have done in the past. And so he says, I'm going to remember and celebrate the work of God in the life of Israel. And that is something we absolutely need to do routinely in our own life, is remember what God has done for us. To count our blessings. To name them one by one and remember them. He says, I've heard the report of you. And then he says, I'm just praying, God, that in the midst of the years you'll revive it. In the midst of years you'll make it known. And in wrath you'll remember mercy, he says in verse 2. But then he goes on and he begins to unfold the work of God. And really all of these verses, which I don't have time to read through, but they all speak of the warfare of God, and it shows God actually bringing troops through and some of his mighty works of delivering the people of Israel through the wilderness over those years. But what's interesting about these passages is that the verbs in Hebrew are difficult to determine what tense they are in, because they can be interpreted to be in the past tense, the present tense, or the future tense. Here's what I love about that. You can read that same passage and put it in the past tense and celebrate the work of God through Israel, through the wilderness, and how many times over and over again he had brought judgment, then he had brought relief, he had brought his people out of slavery. Or you could put it in the present tense. And it's actually Habakkuk seeing God in the work of the Babylonians and seeing God bringing those troops as an act of judgment. And so you could translate it all in the present. But then you can also take this and you could put it in the future tense. And he is seeing what you and I know is going to happen in a symbolic way in the future. That God will deliver his people. That Jesus is coming again. And so we trust in that. And we remember something that is true about Jesus according to Hebrews 13:8. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Let's say that again. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So you can basically say, listen, God saved me in the past. He is continuing to save me, and he will forever save me. Do you believe that? And I'm telling you, that is the pathway. That's the only pathway, I think, to a higher place of peace and joy in the midst of just terrifying circumstances in life. Is you have to trust the faithfulness of God based on his faithfulness in the past. Know that he's being faithful to you in the present, and he will forever be faithful to you in the future. And so Habakkuk he gets all excited about it, and he just writes this glorious ode to the faithfulness and power and sovereignty of God. And we need to recognize the sovereignty of God. Second of all, we need to remember continually the work of God in our lives. And then the third thing that I want you to see is we need to repeat it to ourselves and to others over and over and over again. I laugh sometimes. People say, that song 7 words repeated 11 times. And I get what you're saying. But we've sung the same songs thousands and thousands of times in my 50-some years of life. Why do we keep singing Amazing Grace? Because His grace is still what? Amazing. And we need to keep saying that. We need to keep singing it. Isn't it interesting that we took these incredible words that were written to Amazing Grace and we put them to music? Why do we put things to music? Isn't it interesting? Did you see verse 1? Go back to verse 1 again. A prayer of Habakkuk the prophet according to the Shigionoth. What in the world is that? The Shigionoth. They're not real positive what it is, but the thoughts are, based on the last verse, that it was a musical tune. They kind of took a common tune and they set it to words. Just like we just sang, "Joyful, joyful, we adore thee." We sang it to the tune that Beethoven wrote in his symphony. So we took the tune and we added new words to it. So he takes his prayer and this incredible statement of faith and he puts it to music. And then if you look at the verse 19, look at the very last verse. It says, "God the Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on my high places." And then he says, "Now choir master, get your guitars. I want you to put this to music with instrumentation. I want you to turn this into a song." Why do we put things to music? Music has a way of expressing our praise at a different level, doesn't it? Art has that same way. When we paint it or we sing it, God gave us these artistic musical abilities as an extra layer, an extra step in taking truth and expressing it and joy and expressing it back to God. But it's not just to express it back to God. What's really important, the reason I think Habakkuk said put this to music, is he wanted this truth expressed to others. Music is a discipleship tool. He said, you put this to music, and I want all of the people of Israel, when I'm long dead and gone, and I want Pastor David 3,000 years from now to be preaching on this text. So whatever you do, put it to music. Let's make a song out of it. So it's a song of worship. It's a song of discipleship. It's a song of witnessing. As you sing these works of God and you sing these statements of faith, it was an act of witnessing to your faith and to the faithfulness of God to others. You see what Habakkuk's doing? This is, I think, how we draw forth our faith and our praise in difficult circumstances is we sing those truths, and we're singing them as a witness to our own mind and our own heart, because sometimes we just need to hear ourselves singing. And we do it for our neighbors who are suffering and going through difficult times, and we're singing, hang on, and great is His faithfulness, and we're singing that to the Lord and for the sake of our brothers and sisters beside us. And then the world looks at Christians in the midst of suffering, in the midst of difficult situations, and what do they hear? They hear this tune, and they go, what are they doing? They're singing in the storm. They're singing. What are they singing? They're singing about the faithfulness of God through His Son, Jesus Christ, and is a witness to the world. And so you see Him taking this and just turning it into something incredible by making it a song. And it was a way of remembering. He knew if he could get the children to learn this song, they might be singing it when they become teenagers. And then when they could remember that song, they get into college and they're starting to stray from their faith, or they're hearing, different things, or they're being pulled different ways, and all of a sudden they hear that song Mom and Dad used to play in the car all the time they were so sick of. What were the words of that song? What was the word of that song? And so we put our suffering and God's faithfulness to music. And we go to a higher place where our feet are sure and steady. But we got to get out of the valley where we think all the answers are at. I love that story of Abraham and Lot. They had too much to share, one space. So Abraham said, all right, Lot, you choose. The valley with all the figs, the sheep, the cities, all those things that you think are going to fill you and give you peace and security. You have that. I'm going to go to a higher place. The stuff doesn't grow as well up there. My figs won't be as big as yours. My crops won't be as healthy as yours. But I have a better perspective. I'll be able to see more clearly. And so the Christian life often is making that difficult choice, not to run with the crowd in the valley, but to live at a higher place. A higher place. And there, when we're at that higher place, when we suffer, we can see God coming. And we can see God's faithfulness. And then we can sing. And songs come to us. And they take root. And they become a part of our lives. Like this one. The splendor of the King, clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice, let all the earth rejoice. He wraps himself in light, and darkness tries to hide, and trembles at his voice, and trembles at his voice. You know this, sing it out. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great. And all will see how great is our God. Age to age, age to age he stands, and time is in his hands, beginning and the end, beginning and the end. The Godhead three in one, Father, Spirit, Son, the Lion and the Lamb, the Lion and the Lamb. Sing it with me. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. And all will see how great, how great. Repeat that, sing it out, sing it to the Lord. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. And all will see how great is our God. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. He's great, sing it out. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. Father, you are so great. And now as we take a few moments, we're going to look at the greatest act of love, the greatest act of mercy, the greatest act of rescue. A moment that should never cease to cause us to sing. We reflect upon the cross and what Jesus did for us right now. We thank you. With every head bowed, every eye closed, I'm going to ask you just to sit for a time of reflection, a time of just preparation. You just sit. Confess maybe just a lack of gratitude or a lack of hope or maybe your own needs this morning. Just take for a moment of prayer, and then we'll serve these elements and take them together.